1947 by designer Arkhip Lulka. However, the war that started soon did not allow to pursue the project. Therefore, some of the trophies taken after the war from Germany by Russian specialists were very useful. Among other things, German jet aircraft turned up in the Soviet Union. Changing crosses to stars, these aircraft first of all underwent detailed tests in the Air Force Research Institute. The main attention was given to Me-262. The government seriously considered an issue of copying this Messerschmitt and producing it in series. However, pilot Kochetkov was nearly killed during tests. The problem was the same as with BI-1, dragging into dive at high speeds. This was not the first accident with Me-262. The Germans faced this phenomenon several times. Finally, it was decided to design our own fighters, but with the German engines. They were of two types, Junkers UMO 004 and BMW 003. Those engines, of course, had deficiencies, but there was no other choice. There was no engine of our own. Within the shortest time, engines were put into production at the Soviet plants. UMO was identified as RD-10, while BMW was called RD-20. The Cold War between the former Allies accelerated the wheel of the arms race. The new atomic weapons were also taken into account. Mass production of fighters became a vital necessity. Only they could not let the enemy's bombers enter the native airspace. Creation of a jet fighter was so important for the Soviet Union that the country's leadership assigned several design bureaus to this task. Design teams of Yakovlev, Mikoyan, Lavochkin, and Sukhoi were put to work. Jet aircraft tests were scheduled for the first half of 1946. The terms were very tough. Under such circumstances, Yakovlev decided to save on the new framework development. Here is how he voiced his concept. We had a task of creating an aircraft in which only an engine would be new, while all the rest apparently would remain the same. The pilot would then be getting into well-familiar surroundings and would not feel any difference between the jet and the piston engine aircraft in flight and at takeoff and landing. Yakovlev took its well-known combat-tested Yak-3. Leaving the airframe practically unchanged, he installed a turbojet RD-10 engine instead of the piston one. The fighter was identified as Yak-15. However, while the said fighter was actually a jet modification of Yak-3, the I-300 of the Mikoyan Design Bureau was a completely new aircraft. The nose-wheel scheme, which then became classical for the Soviet jet fighters, was applied on this aircraft. Its armament was also impressive. Two 23mm and one 57mm cannons. The aircraft was equipped with two RD-20 engines. The new speed profile wing allowed to fly at over 900 km per hour. The aircraft was identified as MiG-9. April 24, 1946 became an important date in the history of the Soviet aviation. The MiG-9 jet fighter test sample took off the strip of the Flight Research Institute at 11:12 a.m. Having made two circles over the aerodrome, the aircraft successfully landed. Test pilot Alexei Grinchik was satisfied with the aircraft. Within about a couple of hours, the jet engine roar was again heard over the aerodrome. Yak-15 took off at 1:56 p.m. The aircraft was piloted by test pilot Mikhail Ivanov of the Yakovlev Design Bureau. These aircraft were publicly shown in the same year at the traditional air parade in Tushino. On the next day, Stalin ordered to have 10 or 15 jet aircraft manufactured for the November parade at the Red Square. The leader's order was carried out with no delay. Within just a month and a half, in the beginning of October 1946, the first serial MiG-9 and Yak-15 started to arrive at airfields where they were put together and flown. By that time, in addition to the said aircraft, the first La-150 jet fighters arrived. They were supposed to be shown at the air parade as well. All was ready by November 7, but the new Soviet jet aircraft show did not take place due to bad weather. In spring 1947, MiG-9 and Yak-15 passed the state tests and started their service. The two-engine Su-9 and Su-11 of Pavel Sukhoi were also ready by that time. For the first time in the USSR, these aircraft were equipped with powder-started boosters, a drag chute, and the hydraulic actuators. The aircraft also had air brakes and an ejection seat. However, the Sukhoi and Lavochkin aircraft remained experimental. Air Force considered Mikoyan and Yakovlev fighters to be enough. Moreover, Yakovlev, having updated Yak-15, made its modification, Yak-17, differing from its predecessor by the nose wheel. This aircraft became the first Soviet jet aircraft supplied on export. Very soon, jet fighters started to oust their piston engine colleagues. Further progress in the aircraft industry now directly depended on the appearance of new engines, more lightweight, more powerful, and economic. However, aircraft designers had only two types of German engines at their disposal. And although the experimental Su-11 was equipped with the native TR-1 engines developed by Arkhip Lulka, they were very far from perfection. There was no time to wait until the native engines would reach the required characteristics, so Stalin was proposed to buy engines from the British. What fool would be selling its secrets? Asked the leader in surprise. Nevertheless, in autumn of 1946, a delegation including Artyom Mikoyan and engines designer Vladimir Klimov went to England. The situation was peculiar for the fact that in spring of the same year, Winston Churchill delivered his famous speech in Fulton, giving the start to the Cold War against the Soviet Union. Surprisingly, but money once again turned to be beyond politics. The delegation bought not only 60 Rolls-Royce ready-made engines, but also the license for their manufacture in the USSR. This event made a great impact on the development of the jet aviation in the Soviet Union. Of course, with such engines available, the Soviet designers hurried to implement their capabilities. That's how the new Yakovlev fighter appeared. The aircraft successfully passed the state tests, showing the maximum speed of 930 kilometers per hour. The aircraft was put on service in 1949 as Yak-23. Significant increase of speed was the tendency in aviation of that time. A powerful jet engine